everybody, this is Rose of Sharon, and I'm back again with another book review. Or actually, this is a play. I shouldn't say it's a book. Well, it's in the format of a book, so I suppose giving it that classification is more accurate. But you probably remember when I did my review of Roxanne. Well, it's actually based on the play Cyrano de Bergerac. And I thought, I really want to read that because I love French stories, and it's a play about this man who has the odd disfigurement of one very large schnoz. And yeah, he can't really avoid it. It's just there. It's one of those things that in a room he would definitely stick out, and he's the subject of ridicule, and people can be really disastrous when it comes to people like Cyrano. And Cyrano is a knight, and he's fighting for the country. There's a revolution going on, and of course there's a war. I'm not sure exactly when the war takes place, but it's obvious that from the very beginning, his heart is set on one Roxanne. And of course, Roxanne is actually a modern day retelling of Cyrano, but it doesn't take everything from the play itself. It does take the scene where he gives 11 different remarks based on allegory, simile, and other turns of phrase about his proboscis. And actually it's quite clever, very witty, and you can see that Cyrano is a learned man, and he can match wits with the best of them. Not only does he use his sword as his means of defense, but also his intellect is another object that he wields with great alacrity and aplomb, I should say. But beyond that, it really doesn't repeat anything. Well, there's really no war in the modern day retelling. It's all about, well, Cyrano, of course, is a genius of a man, and he might be considered a little bit of a rogue, but I would say that Christian is more of the rogue than Cyrano, because Cyrano is a man who is old-fashioned, and he lives by the code of chivalry, and he has a great issue with declaring his true feelings for Roxanne. And of course it's seen very well in the stage play, and it leads you to believe that yes, there is a happy ending, but not so much for Christian. And I felt really sad for Christian, but Christian really wasn't meant to be with Roxanne. It was always Roxanne and Cyrano, and that was obvious from the very beginning. You think, oh, they are indelibly in love. It's head over heels, swooning, and all the things that you expect from your typical Valentine's Day fare. But it goes on a very deep level as to how devoted Cyrano really is to Roxanne. He just can't bring himself to say it to her face until Christian actually dies in battle. Pardon the spoiler alert, but he falls in a war. I'm not sure when the war takes place or who they're fighting against, but Cyrano proves himself to be a very gallant man, and even though he might be cowardly at times, he is a man who has Roxanne's best interest at heart, and he only wants to woo her and court her and defend her like a real man. But I really don't have that much to say about it, although I absolutely loved it. It's written in the way that a lot of period pieces are written in that kind of language. So it might need a little bit more explaining, but I really don't think it did. I think that it lent itself to the modern era because there are some things that you would never think would have occurred or happened in that time in history. But I think it aged really well, and I think it's a tale of one's true intent, the heart of romance, and what romance really is, what it really looks like, and what devotion is really made of. And I think that's the one thing I take away from Cyrano. And just because other people are going to ridicule you for something that you had absolutely no control over, say, my best analogy is, take for example somebody who might have been born with a speech impediment. Well, no, that's actually something that you can fix. Never mind. Take for example, you have somebody who who's born without an arm, or well, yeah, no, that can be fixed as well. Take for example someone who well, I don't know if they're going to be able to fix this in time, but take for example someone who's born blind. They didn't ask to be born blind, they're born blind. And they have to acclimate themselves to the world, and they can either see the world, for lack of better terminology, in a methodology of kindness and gratefulness and goodwill, or they can be tainted by that, thinking that maybe they did something and they're being punished, or they inherited it from their parents. Like, I remember there's something in the Bible, Old Testament knowledge or Old Testament theory, that had, even into the seventh generation, you would pay, if you were in the seventh generation, if your mom and dad committed some grievous sin, whether of commission or omission, then you, by relation, would be also condemned of that sin. And that, oh my, yeah, I really don't like Old Testament law or thinking. There's no way to think, but some of us still think that way. And Cyrano, he proves himself to be a man of real caliber, and I'm glad he does. And even when Christian dies, he shows compassion and grief for the friend that he lost, even if that friend was a rival. And I thought that was a really good illustration of unconditional valor and love. And of course, he reads Don Quixote, and I thought, oh, okay, so Don Quixote was written in the same time period, so it's interesting. I'm not exactly sure when Don Quixote was written, but apparently same year, or around the same time. But that's all I had to say about Cyrano. I would suggest actually reading the book before seeing Roxanne, because Roxanne is diametrically different, but still is a really good modern interpretation of Cyrano de Bergerac, even though it's not verbatim. Is still, I think, a pretty close imitation of what Broussard, of what Broussard really wanted, or what he wanted to depict and what he wanted to proclaim on stage with these characters that are so beloved. But that's all I gotta say. Until next time, live long, prosper. Ciao, Tootsie.